Thank you very much and the organizing committee for this invitation. So we all know, we are familiar of the unmet needs in sarcoidosis treatment, what to do with steroids, other optional first-line agents, combination treatments, off-label drugs, and biologics designed for other studies, and also the endpoints that we use in clinical trials. I will start with 3 trials that were published the last 2-3 years. The Sarcor trial examined the different doses of prednisolone, 20 versus 40 milligrams, in an open label, pulmonary and extrapulmonary indications of the disease for 6 months, tapered and follow up for 1.5 years. And they saw that the relapses were the same among the 2 groups, about 45%, which was anticipated based on the literature. They had similar effect on forced vital capacity, around 6%. They had no difference in quality of life, and they had the same adverse events even in the lower dose of steroids. The PredMed trial, published 1 year ago, is already presented by Professor Wells. They included treatment-naive patients, around 70 in each group, pulmonary indication to treat, defined as symptomatic and with some functional impairment. The primary endpoint of the study was the mean change from baseline for forced vital capacity at 6 months, and they were randomized either to receive prednisone at 40 milligrams per day and tapered, or methotrexate starting from 15 milligrams a week and up to 25 milligrams per week upon tolerance. And as Professor said, the prednisone was non-inferior to, the methotrexate was non-inferior to prednisone after 6 months in terms of AVC, but there were some cases also with pulmonary fibrosis, around 12% in total. But also, we should remember that methotrexate after 6 months was associated with a minimally clinically important difference of 8 points at general health status of these patients. Regarding side effects, it was liver and abdominal discomfort, nausea, and some fatigue. Now, the EFZO trial have been published originally in 2023. This is an neuropilin modulator. In this study, phase 2 study published in Chest, they were trying ascending doses, 1, 2, and 3, 1, 3, and 5 milligram per kilogram versus placebo, and it showed some effect in steroid tapering, AVC, and quality of life at the higher dose. And this was followed by post-hoc analysis of the same study that grouped together the 3 milligram and the 5 milligram dosing, and as a therapeutic family showed fewer relapses and a positive effect on AVC. So to move to the newest data that we have available, the study on namilumab has been published this year on ERJ. The concept is that GM-CSF can be involved as a modulator in persistent granuloma. So they tried namilumab, anti-GM-CSF antibody, in this double-blind randomized controlled trial, 1 versus 1 subcutaneously with placebo. At randomization visits, participants were required to stop all immunosuppressants if they were on it and start taking steroids in a time frame of 6 to 10 weeks. They were required to have symptomatic active disease with a PET scan positive upon randomization. The primary endpoint was rescue events, defined as a clinically significant worsening of pulmonary or extrapulmonary disease requiring rescue treatment with steroids, or any treatment discontinuation due to lack of efficacy, making it impossible either to taper off steroids or institution of immunosuppressants. This is a flow diagram of the study. Some of the patients left the study due to quality events, so there was a modified intent to treat population, but namilumab reached stable blood concentrations after 2 weeks. These are the demographics of the study. You can see that the namilumab group had a longer standing disease, 9 years versus 5. They were more often on oral corticosteroids, 60%, and they had more widespread extrapulmonary disease. But the results of the study were all negative. Primary endpoint was not met. You can see that they had similar rescue events between namilumab and placebo. Time to first event was shorter for namilumab. There were a lot of treatment discontinuation events, and complete steroid taper was more frequent numerically, albeit not significant, in the placebo group. Also, there was no effect of namilumab on FVC, DLCO, and quality of life patient-reported outcomes. And the modified ratio to treat analysis, the forest plots, all are regarding risk event risk, are all in favor of placebo versus the study drug. The namilumab group had some adverse events, 4, that required treatment discontinuation, and had more adverse events related to pulmonary sarcoidosis, exacerbation, and symptoms. So as seen in this graphical abstract, this was a negative study. This was probably the first study using PET in study design, and rescue events as a meaningful endpoint. EFZO-FIT is the largest randomized trial published today with around 270 patients presented at ERS 2025, symptomatic, chronic, above 6 months, pulmonary sarcoidosis. The patients were randomized to take 3 or 5 milligrams per kilogram or placebo and stay on concomitant immunosuppressants, if any. And the primary endpoint was the change from baseline in mean daily oral steroids at 1 year. The primary endpoint was not met, so the steroid tapering was not successful in EFZO group. Also in FVC, no result, but there was an improvement in the lung score regarding King's questionnaire in patients in EFZO. And this is from slides provided by the company, because the study is not fully published yet. And they show that they recruited patients from all pulmonary function phenotypes, obstructive, restrictive, mixed, normal, and isolated DLCO. And they saw in their analysis that among patients with a restrictive phenotype, there was a difference in treated patients versus placebo of 120 mLs. So there has been a meeting with FDA to further proceed with a new study, a new phase 3 study, evaluating as primary endpoint FVC instead of steroid reduction, inclusion criteria being restrictive lung phenotype with stable background treatment and no try for fast taper, and dosing a little frequently every 3 weeks. And as a secondary point, King's sarcoidosis questionnaire. pending, of course, further funding of the new study. And finishing my lecture, XTMAB16 is an anti-TNF biologic. We all know how it works in sarcoidosis. It has been originally developed similar to infliximab, but it's not a biosimilar. It is considered specific for sarcoidosis. You can see the structure is similar to infliximab and adalimumab, but in vitro supposed to have a significant effect in granuloma formation. This data have been presented by Dr. Roby at ATS. So they used, this was a part 2A trial. They used ascending doses of 2 and 4 milligrams per kilograms of the new drug every 2 and every 4 weeks compared to placebo. This is an exploratory analysis, so there is no statistical analysis in this study. They used similar criteria with EFZO-FIT trial regarding steroids and immunosuppressants. Extensive fibrosis was also excluded from the study. This is a flow diaphragm. More white population on their 50s, males, a lot of them on immunosuppressants with a high FVC, 87%. And they saw that they had important reduction in daily dose of steroids, mainly at the 4 milligram per kilograms subdoses. They had also improvement in AVC, mainly at the higher dose, Q2 weeks. They had improvement in quality of life, FAS and King's questionnaire. The drug was well tolerable, but regarding immunogenicity, this is an important issue in anti-TNF biologics. You want to have the lowest anti-drug antibodies and neutralizing antibodies, and this is evident with Q4 weeks dosing. So the company is advancing with a phase 2B trial globally. Fortunately, these studies are also planning to have Greek patients in them to evaluate the higher dose Q4 weeks for further evaluation in clinical trials. Briefly, these two anti-interleukin molecules, sarilumab and anti-interleukin-18, have been negative studies. So what's next? Next is coming the upfront combination of steroids with methotrexate in cardiac sarcoidosis. In cardiac sarcoidosis, a bunch of other medications like JAK inhibitors are studied. Professor Wells also already discussed about the Brompton SARC taper study to evaluate tapering steroid strategies and suitability. There is the PHENOSAR trial examining azithromycin and doxycycline against Cutibacterium acnes in sarcoidosis. Upfront combination of steroids with hydroxychloroquine, nintedanib in fibrotic phenotype, and oral anti-hitotriiosidase inhibitor in treatment-naive first-line treatment. So to conclude, 20 milligrams of prednisolone should suffice in most cases, but still with significant side effects. Regarding the upfront combination, trials are underway, methotrexate in cardiac disease and hydroxychloroquine in pulmonary sarcoidosis. As for other agents, as first-line agents, methotrexate showed similar efficacy at a dose of 25 milligrams, and this could lay a paradigm for future trials and for the new drugs that we test currently. New specific treatments are not yet there to be approved, but we wait for the studies, as we saw. In fibrotic disease, we should expect controlled trials of drugs related to late pathogenetic stages of the disease. Extimab is definitely the first biologic designed for sarcoidosis. And as for the endpoints that we use, we should think and conclude who, when, and how to taper from steroids, and how to inform maintenance strategies as the rheumatologist. Thank you.